You guys ready?
I think we're good to go.
Yeah?
All right, how do we switch the screen on? There she is, there we go, awesome.
Right. Hello everybody, welcome to this panel. We are going to be talking about the wide world of customization, specifically Amiibo, but you know, anything that revolves around custom figures and whatnot. My name is Josh Brown from Toys for Games. I am joined by Jason Ganos.
Hello.
I can confirm he is cuter in person, sitting next to him.
Thank you.
Also joining us from Nintendo Wire, we have Lauren Musney. Down on the end, we have TJ Sensula, also known as Custom Conquest, Dark TJ, Hero TJ. How many other aliases do you have?
Just 3 for now.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We'll see how the day goes.
Right. And then joining us via Skype, we have the wonderful, the talented Ganda Kris. Now, unfortunately, Ganda wasn't able to make it to our panel as originally intended, but she did agree to still be a part of it via Skype, and she's going to be doing a custom while we sit here and talk. Is that right, Ganda? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
I think I'm lagging, but...
All right, so Ms. Kris, I'm going to make you full screen here for just a second and make it a little bigger. I know it's a little pixelated. The internet connection here is not fantastic. It's not terrible. But during this entire presentation, the entire hour, she's going to be working on this. We can see the progress of what it goes into to make a custom Amiibo. So take it away, Ganda Kris. You can go ahead and explain what you're going to do.
Okay, so I will be painting Roadhog from Overwatch. I've been wanting to do a lot of the Overwatch characters. I've already done Tracer, and I've done Diva. So the next one that is on my list is Roadhog, and he's actually one of my favorite characters. So we're gonna hopefully see this from start to finish. And yeah, I'm super excited.
Hopefully the internet connection gets a little better so you won't see just a pixelated mess. Right. We're going to get there.
Regardless, we'll check in with you maybe in the middle and then definitely at the end and see what it looks like and see how it turns out. So we're excited to see what you come up with as always. But we kind of want to start with this panel with talking about how customs kind of blew up and became a mainstream thing that everybody was kind of aware of. Custom figures and custom art in like the toy realm. I was talking with Lauren earlier. Started many years ago. What were you saying? People started with?
Back in the day, early 2000s, it was all about Dunnies. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dunnies by Kid Robot, but they were some of the first blind box figures available online. It was a huge hit, and eventually they made blank figures available so people could buy them and customize them, and they turned out to be these really elaborate art pieces. And so it wasn't really any surprise to me when people started gradually taking Amiibo and turning them into art pieces too. It was really cool.
Yeah, it seemed like it was inevitable. You know, Funko Pop, they were being customized well before Amiibo came around. So there was all these little different areas that artists would tackle their own specific little collections, but it was never getting like the mainstream recognition. You know, like you could get on message boards of like a specific thing, and people would be showing off their customs and whatnot. But it really wasn't until Amiibo came out that it became much bigger than these isolated little communities. Amiibo's to blame for a lot of things, good or bad. This is definitely has been one of the best things to come of the Amiibo craze and the shortage of Amiibo and everybody rushing to go find the Amiibo. It turned into people creating pieces of art from these things that were super hard to get, that made them feel even more difficult to have in their collections. Jason, you were on the Amiibo train from way back when. Yeah.
So Amiibo definitely took my life by storm. If you don't know me, I am one of the founders of Nintendo Wired. The other founder's right here. I started Amiibo News about 2 years ago, and it was never supposed to be this. I was never supposed to be at PAX doing a panel. It was never meant to be as big as it got, but it did. And if you look on the left up here, you can see this rotating dark Toon Link that I painted. And this is what custom Amiibo used to be. It was reskins, and it was just painting over something. But then you take a look at the Amiibo on the right, and you see these amazing pieces by Miss Ganda Kris, who's right here on the screen. This Alolan Raichu, Alolan Marowak, and Alolan Executor. And you can see how these have essentially transitioned from just simple repaints to incredible works of art on their own. And I can tell you when Amiibo started, this was not something I'd ever expect to see, especially about 2 years into this. So it's definitely been a ride.
Yeah, and the coolest thing has been when you see articles on IGN and Kotaku and Polygon showcasing the artwork of these artists, because the people writing the stories and working at these sites are fans just like we are of these artists, and how, you know, the cool things that they're doing with these little figures. So it's definitely become mainstream. Like, I don't remember several years ago, you know, Polygon putting up stories about cool custom pop figures or anything like that. It was in line with the Amiibo craze. TJ, you work with Amiibo.
I do, quite a bit.
Yeah, you make some customs.
Been known to.
Yeah. Did Amiibo get you into customizing, or were you customizing before then?
I had certainly done my fair share of toy customizing, going back as far as 20 years or so. I've always been artistically inclined, and I've always been very interested in creative things, and I like working in digital mediums as well as physical mediums, but I had kind of fallen away from it. But Amiibo seduced me back in because of one very specific area of functionality, and that is that it works in the game, that I can change the toy, and the changes that I make are reflected in the game that I play it in. So we have characters, the entire Smash roster has numerous alternate appearances. Some are as simple as changing the color, some completely change the character. And then when you get into the Mii fighters, the sky's the limit. You could do anything. So as soon as I knew that there was going to be a Link Amiibo, I knew I was going to make a Dark Link Amiibo from day one. And the second I got it, I started digging into them. And then as soon as I knew they were going to be Mii Fighter Amiibo, I knew I was going to be making quite a few, because the only characters in Smash that are cooler than Link and Little Mac is me. And Nintendo let me do that so that I can take this relatively generic looking sword fighter and make him look as close to my Mii or someone else's Mii as possible. That really enticed me.
If you're not familiar with what his Mii looks like, you can take a look at the presentation on the screen right now. He is right in the middle, next to my Mii and Happily Candied's Mii.
I'll help.
There you go.
There we go. Now he's definitely more recognizable.
I don't see my Mii up there.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, but his customizations are always spot on. You go the extra mile when it comes to making sure that every single detail matches either the person or the character, and I think that's what we find the most endearing.
Thanks. There's a lot of tricks that you pick up, and there's a lot of tricks that I learned from other custom artists, and I'm inspired, of course, by the work I see Ganda Kris do, and some of the other customizers out there whose work I'm sure you've seen. And as you start to become more acquainted with how these things are put together, it opens up the doors for what you can do to manipulate it to make it look how you want it to look. Because even though it has a very robust in-game customizing features, and games have they function differently with different Amiibo. A lot of what I do is oriented towards Smash because it has such a robust custom option. But that's all this thing right here. If you have never seen inside an Amiibo, this is what it is. You've got this little Smash token, you've got this little container, and then this is your NFC chip. And this is what holds all of that data. And this is really all you need. So when we think of Amiibo, I think a lot of us think of a figure, but Amiibo is not contained in a figure. Amiibo is this, and this with the figure is an Amiibo figure. Amiibo with this is an Amiibo card. An Amiibo with this is the yarn plushie. So I don't even think we've scratched the surface of the potential of what Amiibo can really be, and I really am inspired and encouraged to see customizers branch out and create things that are not just figures. Of course, I love the figures, and I spend a lot of time working on that, and that interests me because they make great display pieces, and they also are fun to work on, and then you put them in the game, and you can use them as a toy. So it's not just a little trophy. It's a trophy that you can use, which is super awesome. I can't get enough of that. But it's just this. If you find any way to take this and apply it to some creative endeavor, you've essentially made a custom Amiibo.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see the evolution of custom figures, and not just, we're going to be talking a lot about Amiibo because that's all this guy likes is Amiibo. But
Are there other Toys to Life figures?
I don't think so.
I think there's some. Disney Infinity, Skylanders.
Oh, yeah.
What happened to Disney Infinity?
Disney Infinity are great for custom figures.
Yeah.
Right now.
They really are. I have to say that I've more recently started expanding my customizing to use Skylanders and Disney Infinity for their true purpose, which is to be customized into Amiibo. It's what every Skylander always aspired to become. And oh man. and for Disney Infinity, we have this amazing set of figures. They are amazing figures. And now they're given new life in the form of Amiibo, and that's something that excites me too, because they're a similar scale, and you can use a lot of the assets from those other figure lines to enhance a custom Amiibo. So you don't necessarily need to be restricted to just one figure. A lot of the ones that you see on that bottom panel are piecemealed from several different Amiibo figures, or even sometimes from other figures because they looked like they would fit together nicely.
I mean, you've taken like Burger King toys, right? And you've taken them apart
And sports.
Yeah, and repainted them or resculpted them, reshaped them in some way, just so they would fit the Amiibo the way that you envisioned them.
Yeah, I often like to encourage aspiring artists not to look at something for what it is, but for what it can be. And if you start to redefine the way that you look at things, then you can be inspired to build upon it or change it. And I needed to have a flexible plastic that I could use to build onto Amiibo that I wanted to be very smooth. And particularly when I was doing the Koopalings, if you've seen Custom Conquest, I made all 7 of the Koopalings in their smash pose, which was a monster undertaking. And I wanted to have teeth that were perfect, and I wanted to have nails that were perfect, and I didn't want to have to sculpt it, so I took the tips off of sporks. So somewhere in my house is a box of 1,000 sporks, and I just keep clipping the teeth off of them. And then at some point I realized this is also a flat, durable piece of flexible plastic that I can heat up and bend and manipulate in any way that I want. And they're super cheap. You can get 1,000, like I did, from Amazon for like $10. Hey, that's me.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because when Amiibo started first being customized by a lot of people in the community, everybody was kind of starting off with repaints, painting them to be a different figure, like Jason was showing off his link that he did. It was a simple process. It was difficult, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going to sit up here and say that it's an easy thing to do. But a lot of people were, just working with the repaints, changing the color schemes and whatnot. And then it started to evolve into creating more artistic pieces, using clay, using sporks, using other pieces of other toys. Do you guys recall when that shift started to happen, or?
I can give you a really good example of this. About 2 years ago, I did my very first charity auction for St. Jude, which was called Customs for a Cure, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But we had a lot of people submit custom Amiibo to be raffled off for that. And most of those were simple repaints. And again, I don't want to say simple, because some of the most amazing artists I've ever met do variations of repainting. I think GandaChris is actually one of the first people I've ever encountered who has taken it to a completely different level, especially with Amiibo. And again, you saw those Alolan Pokemon that we had up on the screen just a few moments ago. I mean, these are the kinds of like works of art that she can like output, and I think we started to see a lot more of those in the past year. I absolutely love the direction that it's going. If you are familiar with Customs for Akira, if you've ever seen it before, you should see the customs that are going to essentially be in this next wave, because they're absolutely spectacular. There's actually one image I can show you of just what people can do with customs, and this is a really good example of it. And some of these may look like repaints, and I'm going to move you up there. You have the Proto-Mans, but at the same time, you have you have Amiibo from Okami and Princess Mononoke, and obviously Pac-Man and Pokken Tournament. There's so many different ways that you can arrange an Amiibo and sculpt an Amiibo, and it's definitely not just putting a new coat of paint on it.
Yeah, it went from simple color changes to these, and every time somebody comes out with something new, it's incredible to see the amount of talent that it takes to make these things. Like TJ, I don't know how you and your fellow artists do the stuff that you guys do.
All right, let me give you like the shotgun version. I heat it up, I pull it apart, I put it back together as best as I can based on the components of that figure that I'm going to use, and then I either find attributes and components from other figures to fill in the pieces that I need, or if it doesn't exist or I don't believe I can find it, then I use sculpting putty to sculpt it, and then once everything's sanded and smooth, I paint it. And that's the nuts and bolts of the process.
And how many hours would you say that it takes to complete
one?
It
really varies. Do they see those ones on the bottom? Yeah, okay. So those ones on the bottom there, you can see that Fire Mario and that Shy Guy and the Peach and the Royal Clown Car, something like that can be turned around in 5 to 10 hours. But the Hammer Slam Bowser that you see with the hammer over there, because even though he's in his original colors, it originally started as a Skylander, so it needed a complete repaint. I'm just giving Josh a hard time. If it involves a complete repaint and a complete resculpt, each Koopaling probably averaged about 40 hours. And so you can imagine that it does take a long time. And there are some imposed breaks that you have to take, where I like to use an air dry clay called Milliput. It's actually not a clay, it's a 2-part epoxy called Milliput, because once it settles, it'll bond metal together. You could smack it with a hammer. I've tested the durability of this to see just how much I can abuse it without it breaking, and it's pretty stinking durable. But I want to let it set overnight. They say it'll dry in 3 to 4 hours, but it depends on how thick it is. There's a lot of variables. So I'll let it go overnight, which means I'm going to have to work on something else in the meantime. So usually, and paint has to dry. I like to use acrylic. It dries pretty quick, but sometimes you have to do a lot of coats. You've heard that if you hear any one piece of advice for customizing, it's thin your paints. Yep. And that means you're going to have to do multiple coats. Some people don't understand why you're encouraged to thin your paints. You get that instant gratification when you put a heavy coat of paint on, because you see the transformation quickly, and all of a sudden you're like, this is changing, it's becoming what I want it to be. But the problem that you have then is you can see the brush, and when the brush starts to impose character upon your figure in an unintended way, then it takes on less of the factory quality appearance and more of a rough appearance. It's okay if that's deliberately the style you're going for, but no Amiibo figure have heavy brush strokes. So if you want to have that same style, either you're going to be using an airbrush or a spray paint of some type that doesn't leave brush marks, or you're going to thin your paint. Different paints have different degrees of thinness. If you use like a miniature figure paint, like Vallejo, which is what I've been using a lot lately, or Citadel, they're pretty thin, so you don't need to water them down as much. But if you're using a lot of the more common ones that you would find from a craft store like Folk Art or Americana, you definitely need to water those down. And then when you put it down with a heavy water layer, it's very smooth, but you can still see the original coat. It's a lot more viscous, so you have to keep applying layers until you have the desired opacity.
So what you're saying is the key element in all of this is patience, pure patience, and the drive to just keep painting and repainting until you get those results at the end.
Yeah, there's this production triangle, no matter what it is that you're making, of good, fast, and cheap. Pick any two. You can't have all three. So if you want it to be done really fast, you're gonna have to, it's gonna cost you a lot of money, or you're gonna have to cut some corners. So you have to just decide what's best for you in terms of what you want your goals to be as far as achieving what it is that you think it is. And I have no problem with practicing. And with something, Amiibo are not cheap. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't have limitless resources to just buy 1,000 of these things to keep experimenting and make these mistakes. I want to do it one time. And so if I'm doing something that is particularly challenging, or I'm not exactly sure how it's going to be, I practice and I'll try it a few times until I feel like I'm confident enough to be able to do it on the actual figure. And that way it yields a higher quality result at the end.
GandaChris, can you hear us, by the way?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. I'm really curious to get your input on this as well. So the process that you usually do to create some of the masterpieces that you make, especially some of the more complicated ones like these Alolan Pokemon.
Well, the first thing I really do is I look at the Amiibo that I want to take apart, and then I analyze what do I need to remove, and then that's when the massacre happens, where I just cut off limbs and ears and all that stuff. And I try to keep as much of the Amiibo, but if I don't need it, then it's definitely going to get chopped off. So I start by doing that, by analyzing the Amiibo. I come up with the design. I don't really write it out, but it's definitely in my head. And then I look at it and I realize, okay, so what do I need to add? So I definitely strip it down first, and then I add whatever I need to. And then that involves like clay work, sanding it down. Definitely a lot of work goes into this. I know TJ can definitely say the same, that it's just hours and hours of sitting at my desk trying to add and remove. And once I do add and remove all the pieces of clay and stuff, that's when I go ahead and I begin to paint.
I'm with you, sister. And I will say she is remarkably fast. Like everything I said about the production triangle, it doesn't apply to her. She's deity level Amiibo customizer. It is super unbelievably factory quality impressive, and her paint is unparalleled. Like, you could see in fact, one of the things that separates GandaChris's Amiibo from even the ones that Nintendo has is the value, the shading that she incorporates. If you look at like a Yoshi, for example, it's a pretty flat colored character, and so it yielded a fairly flat colored Amiibo. But you could also say the same thing about a Raichu. Raichu's pretty flat, but look at all the different shading aspects that she has on this, and it definitely makes it pop. She's got shadows and highlights, and it's so well integrated because of how her understanding of the lighting of her imagined scenario, that you have this amazing masterpiece at the end. And it's easy for her to just say, yeah, and then I paint it, and then I paint it. But look at that. This painting process is multi-tiered.
I was so incredibly impressed when I saw the Detective Pikachu custom that she made. The eyes alone, they're like miniature canvases, because you can see the gradients of shading that she uses throughout the eyes alone. And you put that side by side with a regular Pikachu, and the Pikachu is this block of color for an eye with maybe like the little twinkle, but it's very two-dimensional. But Ganda brings that 3D to you in this beautiful artistic form, and that's definitely something that stands out in her work among any type of Amiibo.
You know, everybody's got their own style when it comes to doing art. Like, you see some artists, they like to hold things really close, some like to hold far away. I have a pretty steady hand, but I like to be very careful as I do it. So like, if I'm doing something very, very small, like eyes or highlights on eyes, I'm just moving very, very slowly. I've watched GandaChris paint eyes, and it's like this. So I'm over here talking, swipe, and so fast and so sure. Like, she knows exactly what she wants to put on there, and it takes her one try to do it. And I'm like, wow. So that amazes me. I have to do it way slower.
Thank you. honestly, I definitely didn't, I wasn't born with this talent. This has been years of practice and practice. And I think the coolest thing that I got from this community is the fact that everyone has different styles. There's so many different styles that everyone has, and you can tell by just looking at an amiibo, oh, this is Xanarth and Sky, or this is like Kick-Ash. Like, I think that's the coolest thing, is that I've gotten to meet all these other artists that have unbelievable talent as well, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, like TJ was saying, it's pieces of art. They're masterpieces, and like Ganda was saying, she wasn't born with this. None of you artists were.
I was.
You were not born to customize Amiibo, but all of the.
I was born to fight ninjas. I just customized Amiibo on the side.
But all the custom artists that we know were born artistic. You know, that is a skill that you could hone in and develop through. But that's something that's with you. You either have the talent or you don't. You know.
I would dispute that, because there's some truth to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are definitely people with artistic inclinations and that do have a natural bent towards that. But I definitely think if you're somebody who finds you maybe don't have a very steady hand, or painting is not your thing, there are ways to do it. Like, if there's the desire, there are ways to subtract some margin of error by modifying your approach.
Sure.
If you know how you want, or what you want the final result to be.
That's the key, is knowing what you want it to end. And if you don't have that vision ahead of time, it's not going to turn out well.
Yeah, I think that knowing what you want it to be is kind of part and parcel with the desire to do it. Like, if you thought, I'd like to customize an Amiibo, but you don't really have any idea of what Amiibo you want to customize, yeah, maybe you're putting the cart before the horse. But if you're like, I'd really like to make a Fire Mario, but I don't know if I have the ability to do that, there are ways to do it. And I would encourage you to not be discouraged if you don't naturally have those skills, because they do develop over time. I've been customizing figures probably for longer than GandaChris has even been alive. And some of the first things that I made are, how would George say, pretty ratchet?
Yeah,
I think so.
That's exactly.
So some of my early ones were not particularly impressive, and even the ones that I look at now, I'm pretty heavily critical of my work, because I always see things that could be better, and I reject the idea of complacency or good enough. But at the same time, I also accept that art is a very flexible medium, in that it is never finished, only abandoned. At some point, you just can't put another brushstroke on it. At some point, you need to move on to the next project. And so sometimes you might feel like, I don't have this in me, but how are you gonna know unless you start doing it? Go to the 99-cent store and buy 2 super cheap little toys, prime those things, and test your painting skills out. And there are definitely some ways, and there's some resources out there, some amazing resources, that will give you tips to enhance your skills just by modifying the approach.
Like
if you attack it with a
that's on
brush.
here right now.
Custom Conquest, I love that show!
And by the way, the person who's actually doing the painting on the screen right now, this is TJ. Custom Conquest is a show that we have on YouTube that was TJ's creation, that shows you how to create a custom Amiibo from start to finish. And let me tell you, it's a process. One of the most amazing shows I think that we've ever had on our channel. And I'm going to let you describe the process of this, because honestly, Amiibo have jumped from just like, oh wow, this looks really pretty, you know, on my desk, to almost like a full-fledged YouTube series.
Yeah.
What I like about Custom Conquest is that I was customizing Amiibo anyway for my personal needs. I was doing Smash Supremacy and Mii v Mii, which utilized all 7 skins of the Koopalings. And so I have on my shelf, if you can imagine, 8 Bowser Juniors with this sticky note that keeps falling off, written on it which one each is, and it very quickly started to infuriate me. And so I'm like, okay, I need to be able to identify on site which one of these is Larry, which one of these is Morton, which one of these is my Dark Link. And the most exciting way for me to do that would be to modify it. And I thought, if I'm going to do this anyway, and if I'm going to go through this trouble anyway, I cannot be the only person out there who wants their Dark Link to look like Dark Link. I cannot be the only person out there who wants their Koopalings to look like the Koopalings. And so that's where the idea for the show came from. I just decided I would document the process that I went through, and hopefully there are some gems in there for people to be able to get ideas for making their own custom. So I start at the very beginning of the process. I describe what I'm intending to do, and then throughout the course of the next 10 to 20 minutes, you watch me put it together. And I try to explain as best I can my mistakes, because I never, like, from start to finish, get it right. Like right now on the screen, I'm drawing on this snowflake, but it was not a very symmetrical snowflake, and I eventually didn't like it, so I wound up convincing my wife to cut all those T's out for me out of electrical tape, and then I had a perfectly symmetrical snowflake. And if I had known to do that the first time, I would have saved myself maybe 2 hours or so, because I needed to repaint it and get it all off there. So in an effort to try to save people from making some of those same mistakes or falling down some of those same pitfalls, I try just as much to document my failures as my triumphs. And so this one right here, that Bowser Jr., was one I didn't intend to make because I had had enough of the clown car by that point. I'd already made 7 Koopalings, and then Bowser, and then the Mario and the Luigi. But as I was inspecting the base of the Bowser Skylander, I'm like, dang nabbit, if this doesn't look exactly like the bottom of Bowser Jr.'s clown car when the wheels are deployed. So in the process, even though I went in with a pretty solid attack plan, inspiration struck halfway through, and I started using pieces in unintended and unexpected ways, and I feel like in that case, I wound up with an Amiibo that I'm very happy with.
And we were talking about earlier that every single artist has something that distinguishes them from other artists. And I think one of yours is that you attach these personalities and the process with the videos to the Amiibo. So they stand out, you see the process of them being created, and you see the development, you see the beginning and the end, and that's definitely something that sets you apart from other people, because where else are we going to find such a detailed process laid out in a visual form like this?
Yeah, and sometimes when you try to sculpt Ludwig's hair like 18 times and it just can't seem to be right, and you have to have a grown man tantrum and start throwing over your workspace, that's something that needs to be preserved for all time and for posterity. It's not perfect, and every time out there, I don't nail it first try. And so I hope that in some small way, that gives other people permission to feel like I don't have to nail it the first try. I can redo this. It starts with breaking a toy. And I always remind myself that. I broke it to even start. So at some point, it's up to me to determine when it's fixed. And that I kind of let the work tell me when it's done. When it starts to look like what I intended for it to look like, that's when I'm like, okay, this toy is now fixed.
Yeah. One other thing we want to talk about is how custom Amiibo, custom figures in general, have given us the opportunity to give back to the communities, to use them for charity. Jason, you want to talk about what you guys have done?
I want to talk about first 2 years ago, and again, I mentioned this earlier. We started something called Customs for a Cure, and it was something that was very small. And we started off with about 4 or 5 custom Amiibo from custom artists around the internet, and it was a fun time. We had no live stream. It was just some eBay auctions, 100% of the proceeds going to St. Jude. Because what better way to give back than to give back with something that you know, and I know Amiibo. Fast forward a year, Lauren joined the team. We had amazing people on our team. We've met so many more amazing custom artists. You have Evolos, you have AK Shop, you have Ganda Kris. I mean, there are so many you can't even count. And so many were so generous to donate these pieces to us. We threw a 24-hour live stream. We threw them up on eBay, 100% of the proceeds going to St. Jude. We also had some online gaming tournaments where we raised money for St. Jude as well. And when all was said and done, we made about $10,000 in 24 hours and gave it to St. Jude. Thank you. I think what's even more exciting is in less than a month, on October 1st, we're going to be doing it again, and we're going to be doing it bigger. All the Amiibo that you see on the screen right now were part of a pre-event, and there are going to be so many more on October 1st when Customs for Akira comes back. It's going to be a 24-hour live stream. We're going to be hosting it on YouTube. I know Twitch is broadcasting this, so sorry, Twitch. But it's going to be a really good time if you want to watch video gaming and amazing custom artists doing their thing. That's what this is about. And obviously, Josh, I know that you do things as well with customs.
Yeah, with our podcast, Toys for Games, my co-host, Jason Greer, we decided to kind of steal their idea, but make it our own. My co-host and I, we are not artists. We are not capable of making the amazing customs that make thousands and thousands of dollars for their charity events and whatnot. So we decided to have fun with it for our community. So we made customs of our own. Most of them were just repaints. We got our kids involved to help out and just have fun repainting some figures and put them up for auction. And the last one that we did, the Customs with Care, all the money went to takethis.org, which is a fantastic organization. We actually have one crazy guy in the audience who spent a lot of money on some custom Lego Dimension figures. But it was something fun that we were able to do. We didn't want to go grand and try to outdo them.
Thank you.
We could have, but we chose not to.
To your credit.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it wasn't a competition thing. We just wanted to do something fun, in line with what they've been doing already, and we really enjoyed it. And there's nothing better than giving back to people that definitely need it and appreciate it. So.
Well, to your credit, Josh, the beginning of every great Amiibo custom is a great idea, and you filled in a gap in everybody's Amiibo collection with your bronze Mario.
That's right. Yeah. It was something that needed to be done. Nintendo refused to put out a bronze Amiibo to go in line with the silver and gold. So
you stepped up to the plate because that's
someone
the
had
kind
to
of
do
hero
it.
you are.
Yeah, I took one for the team. So
and Jason Greer's patriotic Mario was pretty epic too.
Yeah,
I love that thing.
Yeah.
I bid on that and I lost.
Yeah.
Granted, I only bid like $2.
I think I bid on that too and lost.
But I think the most important thing to take away from this is a lot of people look at me and they see me on Twitter, and you would imagine that.
And they think he's definitely not cuter in person. Look at this stud.
It's amazing. It's really amazing that we get a lot of comments saying, these are kids' toys. You're spending your life working on something that are just little Happy Meal toys, and I hear that at least once or twice a week. And you can turn that around into something that can be fantastic for a charity like St. Jude or pretty much any charity that you choose. So you can do something that you love, and at the same time you can make an impact and a difference. And GandaChris, you are an angel when it comes to this kind of thing. The amount of charity that she does, the amount of things that she donates, it exceeds anybody that I've ever met. So if you're unfamiliar with GandaChris, and I would imagine that if you're an Amiibo fan, you probably have at least heard the name, and if you haven't, I guarantee you've at least seen one of her customs. She is outstanding in this world, so I think we should give her a quick round of applause for everything she does.
Definitely. One thing I want to finish, we are going to have time for some Q&A, some questions. TJ actually brought some stuff to give away to people if they want to ask questions and receive a custom Amiibo card.
And they work.
Yeah, they are totally functional. But one thing I want to kind of finish with is the word art. And the three of us, I think we're pretty big advocates for this community, the custom community. TJ, obviously, you're a part of it and one of the leaders of it. But one thing that we've definitely always been challenged with are the people that don't see these as art, that see them as, like Jason was saying, just toys colored differently, or you're just playing with toys type of thing. And what you guys are doing is art. And I will challenge anybody that ever brings that up, that disputes the fact that these are pieces of art. TJ, have you ever had to defend what you do?
For whatever reason, I was just born with this insane, overinflated sense of self. So my confidence levels are through the roof. So I'm unabashed about what I do. So if I'm sitting there painting a toy and someone's like, "Are you painting a little kid's toy?" Like, yeah. And it doesn't bother me because I enjoy doing it. I have fun doing it. If it brings joy to me and if it brings joy to others and if great things are coming out of it, like these charity auctions, then who's to tell me what to do? It's my toy, it's my time, it's my money. I'm gonna make this if I want. I got really discouraged about another project I was working on at some point because it just wasn't turning out the way I wanted to. And a friend was trying to inspire me and pick me back up. And he goes, "The world without art is just eh." And he's right. It's not as profound if you don't imagine the letters, but he's right. Like the art appears in the word earth. And if you take art out, all you have left is EH, and it's just So we need art, and in all of its various facets. This is not that different to me than when people say video games are not art. Of course video games are art. If a book is art, if a movie is art, then certainly a video game, which enhances the experience of both of those mediums by not only giving you a story, by not only giving you visuals, but by giving you the ability to impact and control and guide that experience, of course that is art. So if Nintendo wants to decide that they're going to make toys that give you another way to be able to connect yourself to the game, and if people want to take it upon themselves to take those toys, which are art, before we even start, before a customizer even touches it, it's already art. We're just transforming it into our own vision, our own type of art. And so I don't know what people are talking about if they think anything other than that.
Awesome. Do you guys have anything else before we get some questions?
I was just going to say, stand behind your hobbies. And art is a hobby. Games are hobbies. Art, just everything. Combine that, stand by it, be proud of it. And just like you are. And I think that first statement you made about how
being full of myself?
You are, yes, and that's what I love about you. And I embrace that. You obviously embrace that. And that's a good thing. And embrace what you love and be proud of it and definitely just stand by it. I always tell people that no matter what their hobbies are, as long as they're healthy in some way.
Yeah, don't shrink away from your interests. And following your interests and your skills is what's going to get you closer to your purpose. And you can't be ashamed of that. You can't be shy about that. You love video games? Do video games.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
love painting toys? Paint toys. Do your thing.
It's part of how individuals are defined, and that's the best way you can live. And just, like I said, be proud of it.
And chances are there's going to be somebody out there that thinks it's cool.
Yeah.
I have a 3-year-old daughter. TJ's got kids too. And if nobody else in my family understands it, my nephew, who is 5, he's 6 now, and my daughter, who's 3, they think it's the coolest thing in the world, and that's all I need.
Aww.
I know.
Yeah, I fully accept that I have the same maturity level as my 3-year-old daughter, but that's okay.
You've embraced it. That's the best thing you can do.
I met her. She was more mature than you.
That's
for sure.
That's a good point. Her intellectual maturity is beyond mine.
Do we want to check in with Ganda before we get to questions?
All right, Miss Ganda Kris, can you hear us?
If you guys have questions, you can start lining up at the microphone.
I hope you guys can hear me.
No pushing, punching, kicking, stabbing, hurting, maiming, jump kicking, drop kicking, headbutting, or anything that might hurt your friends in any fashion, whatever.
Have TJ again.
Okay.
Do you have any closing thoughts before we move into our Q&A?
Honestly, this is probably the best community that I've ever been a part of. I've been in the Smash community for the longest time, but hands down, I absolutely love the Amiibo community. The people that you see on the panel, they have supported me and other artists, and without them, I wouldn't be where I am, to be honest. TJ, Toys for Game, Amiibo News, Jason, Lauren, without you guys, I wouldn't be where I am today. So hopefully you guys can hear me, but give them a round of applause for supporting all there's so many artists out there, and they put so much work into just a single figurine, and they're just amazing. So I've just met so many friends and other artists, and they say that I inspire them, but boy do they inspire me, because I just wouldn't be where I am without them. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and get started with some questions.
What would you say is the most ingenious use of some completely random object that you've either seen or used in making a custom amiibo?
You need to tell the spork story.
Yeah.
The spork is like the best thing you could ever use in Amiibo if you watch Custom Conquest. I'll let TJ explain.
I don't know if it's ingenious, but I kind of mentioned it before. I use the spork to make teeth because they're very small and it's difficult to sculpt things that are that symmetrical. So I just clipped off the tips of the spork and glued them to the teeth. And then on Bowser Jr.'s car, I used the body of the spork, the little shovel part, to make the lifting panels that come up because it's the same color as the car itself. So it gave me the opportunity to not have to sculpt these really flat shell-like panels.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think when people started using clay and whatnot, I was blown away. I'm like, nope, I'm done. Like, that's already way too ingenious for my own taste, so.
Oh, Amiibo has incorporated LED lights into theirs, and that's pretty impressive. He's got some pretty creative ideas about how he's enhanced these Amiibo as display pieces, because they also now have some kind of glowing element, and glowing stuff looks cool. Just look at a lightsaber. That's my kid.
Awesome, great question. Yeah, next.
So, being a part of the Kingdom Hearts speedrunning community and also the Amiibo community, have you guys thought about maybe doing a bunch of custom Kingdom Hearts Amiibo, or are those deemed too tedious since every character literally has too much stuff going on?
It's actually funny you mentioned that. Miss Ganda-Kris created a Sora custom Amiibo for me, and I am in absolute love with this thing. Hey, Ganda-Kris, do you happen to have that Sora, or is it already packaged up? There's a little delay.
I could show you the box.
Yeah, let's see the box. I know you're a little blurry, but we can at least see it. Because trust me, if it's in pop culture, especially if it's a video game, you can see she's making an Overwatch Amiibo right now. Chances are there's already a custom of it somewhere, and chances are it's probably Miss Ganda-Kris's.
I think she made that out of a shulk. Is that a shulk?
She did.
Amiibo?
She did.
That's always what interests me the most, is when you see something that's completely transformed from its original Amiibo, is identifying what it began as. I would
like blow her up right now, like bigger on the screen, but I think it would just be this gigantic pixelated mess, unfortunately.
And speaking of boxes, I think we all kind of neglected to mention, there's one person in our community, Seth Hay, who has been instrumental in making these custom figures pop even more, because one of the cool things is putting them back in the packaging. And if you just put them in the packaging they came out of, it looks okay, it looks decent. But Seth Hay has gone that extra step, and he started creating custom boxes for all of these custom figures, and they look incredible.
They are so close to what you'd imagine seeing on the shelves, and I think that's what makes them stand out so much. And he works with various artists. He doesn't just limit himself to one or two people. Right. So to be able to see his work all around online is pretty amazing.
And on the screen
that little
right now, you can see it.
orange circle in the corner is the Seth Hay mark of authenticity.
Yep.
That's the quality mark right there.
That's right. Great question. Thank you.
I have a question as far as for preparing figures for painting. Do you find that you use the same preparations before putting any paint on that you would use for soft plastic and hard plastic, or do you only work with soft plastic?
Amiibo have, at least all of the ones I've encountered so far, I've probably wrecked about half of the Smash line. There's two different types of plastic, a very, very flexible, rubbery plastic that the second it gets heated, you can just kind of wobble it around. And then another type that is always what the base is made out of. It's very rigid. And some characters' legs, like the Fire Emblem, Roy and Ike, I know are like that. Those ones are tough because they will break before they will bend. But with the softer plastic, I do all of my molding and sculpting before I paint, because I like to use heat treatment to be able to mold them. And if you do that after you paint, it very often compromises the paint job. So you wind up having to redo the work anyway. So I personally like to get as much of the final figure in its position as possible. Then depending on how thorough the paint job is, like if it's a complete repaint, I'm going to prime the whole thing. But if I'm just going to do a spot painting or maybe changing the color of one thing or another, then I'll just apply the paint directly onto the area without any prime, but I'll use as many coats as I need to make the color solid.
Do you have any tips for increasing adhesion on the hard plastics? Because I know that can be an issue with paint adhesion.
I haven't experienced it being problematic with these. And I have painted several of the bases, and when I prime it, it stays no problem. When I use a spray primer, when I don't, it's that you're just pushing water around and it doesn't stick at all because that glossy coating definitely makes it paint resistant. So I've used 2 or 3 different primers and I find that they're all pretty easy. There's not much of a difference. But another thing that I've started using is spray paint. I'll get a matte spray paint that is generally the color of what I want it to be. When Nintendo molds these things, they pick a color that is mostly what it is for the mold. So I kind of do the same thing with my primer. I pick a color now in a spray paint, a colored primer, that is mostly the color of what it is, and then it makes the job of shading and highlighting and filling in the other gaps a lot faster, and paint wants to stick to the primer, and the spray paint wants to stick to all types of plastic, wood, metal. So that's been my workaround with it so far.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up. No, okay.
All right. Hi. So what is the first custom figure that you've all seen that really made you feel like this is going to be the next big thing, the custom creation? So what kind of in your eyes, kickstarted this?
For me, it was the Cosmic Pikachu by Evolos.
Yep.
I saw it, and I just started Amiibo News around that time, and I was blown away. And I immediately knew I had to have it. And then a couple weeks later, I saw there was a Cosmic Samus. There's something about the way he paints them that just blew me away, especially with the Pikachu, where the eyes were replaced by these amazing stars. If you haven't seen it before, I highly recommend that you find him on Instagram. Absolutely fantastic. And I think at that point, that was when I knew that custom Amiibo were going to be a thing.
Yeah. And his paint jobs don't show through pictures as well as they should. He gave us Ruby Pikachus at E3 2 years ago, and seeing them in person and being able to hold them, total different ball game than seeing pictures of them. But yeah, that was when I was like, wow, these are legit and these are a thing for a long time.
And Miss GandaChris is holding one up right now too.
Oh, yeah. The quality is just impeccable. Like, I cannot get over how beautiful that one Pikachu is. And I saw it for the first time, and I held it in person for the first time during Customs for Akira last year. And it just stood out among all customs that I had seen up to that point. And to know that we've grown since then is pretty amazing.
Evolos was the first custom Amiibo that I saw also, is the Samus. And the amount of depth that it has is really tremendous, and it's somewhat breathtaking. And we were talking a little bit earlier about signature styles. He has his signature style. Nobody creates an Evolos custom other than Evolos. So they're pretty spectacular.
I remember somebody tried. Somebody tried really hard.
Was that you?
No. Okay. No, mine would be a jumbled mess.
It was an evil nose.
It was just evil nose. Yeah,
Sure.
Absolutely.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
What would you guys say would be your most overambitious idea for like a custom Amiibo? Like something that you like thought you could do, but then you just realized there was like way too many steps to it?
I think we need to ask Ganda that one.
TJ, I'll let you go first on this one, and then Ganda, if you want to respond, if you were able to hear that. But she wanted to know what the most ambitious custom Amiibo, one that you had to like abandon. TJ, you want to go first on it?
Yeah, I've never even considered the possibility of failure. Like,
Of course.
It's totally true, too.
Yes.
I make mistakes, I fall down, but I just keep plowing ahead. But I'm working on a custom right now that's presenting a challenge that's unique in a way that the other ones were not. The Triforce Heroes totem Link. If you can imagine that, where Link, you've got green Link or blue Link running on the bottom, and red Link pointing in the middle, and then green Link ready to swing his sword at the top. The photo is fine when you're looking at a two-dimensional picture, but it's actually an optical illusion, because when you imagine that in the 3-dimension, it's impossible for Link to be perfectly stacked on top of another Link like this when their legs are over the other Link's shoulders. It would actually be like this, like they would be progressive stairs. And so I want it to look like it looks in the pictures, which means you need to make some sort of anatomical compromise. In order for it to be perfect, it's really unachievable. Either I would have to artificially extend the length of their legs, or make their drapes of the bottom of their tunics extra long, because their heads and the torso of the one on their shoulders need to occupy the same mass, which is an impossibility. So right now, the biggest challenge is reconciling how something that was never meant to exist in 3-dimension looks in 3-dimension.
I mean, talking about ambition, I mean, just looking at these, newest Pokemon ones, I mean, I don't know how she was able to put those together, but
Can't even fit the whole thing in there.
right, I know. Like, if you told me you were trying those beforehand, you'd be like, no way, they're not going to look that good. And then there they are. So I don't think ambition is a problem for these artists as far as where they cap out at.
If you've seen GandaChris's Ridley, you know that there's nothing she's not capable of achieving. So it's just a matter of deciding what she wants to do and then executing it. Or executing it. Sorry.
I definitely do have one that I struggled with, though, for the longest time, and it has to be Lunala from the new Pokemon Sun and Moon. The wings were just giving me so much problems at one point, so that one was really, really hard for me.
Did you ever rage quit and chuck a chunk of clay across the room like I did with Ludwig's hair?
I don't rage quit. I definitely just sit there hours on end, trying to finish it. The question I get asked the most is, how long does an Amiibo take? And it's hard for me to ask because, for example, like Detective Pikachu, I was watching Sherlock and Detective Conan all night just to finish that thing because I was so motivated. So I guess the less time I spend on a specific Amiibo is how eager I was to get it finished. So, but Lunala was definitely the one that gave me a run for my money. That one was really difficult.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your question. Yeah.
So do you have any tips for creators and artists who are on a very tight budget or who don't have the accessibility, either be resources or finance, to the tools or different Amiibos for us to practice with?
For sure. Amiibo are expensive toys, and so when I know I'm going to mess with something and break it, I go to Toys R Us and I walk the aisles and I find the bargain bin and I buy $1, $2 toys and I practice on those. I experiment with different ways to disassemble toys. I experiment with different ways to cut toys apart and reassemble them. Super glue, toothpicks. Like, a lot of people have a really elaborate arsenal of sculpting tools. I sculpt everything with toothpicks because they're cheap and they're disposable. And so I just use Milliput, water, and I use that toothpick to fill in the gaps. And that's a great way to get started. At some point you might be like, you know what? I deserve a $12 tool. Once you know what you're doing and you feel like you're going to get the use out of it. But when you're trying to practice, go to Dollar Tree or the 99-cent store. There's tons of action figures there that you can just play with or just wreck. And another thing that I do if you want to spend a little bit more money is I go to GameStop a lot and I buy the 2 for $5. And their Amiibo are usually in the $8 to $10 range, so you could drop $20 and get 5 Amiibo like that. If you want to expand your arsenal and look at some of the Skylanders. Skylanders has been around forever. So there's tons of figures that you could get for $2.50, and a lot of the plastic and a lot of the types of what your approach would be to customize those are the same as you would use for an Amiibo. So I'd encourage you to do that.
I'm not a custom Amiibo artist, but I do a lot of different art in other areas. And something that I do that's very cheap is I collect things with different shapes and colors and patterns that I really like, and I throw them all into this craft area of mine. I save them, and I figure that I can always use them for a future project. And believe it or not, a lot of that stuff comes in handy. And it's stuff like pamphlets I get outside, just everyday life, or things that my friends send me, like scraps from envelopes or little toys that they might pick up on their travels and stuff. Believe it or not, that stuff comes in handy. And best thing you can do is collect, especially if it's the smaller stuff for Amiibo. And you pretty much have this cool collection of art pieces and mediums ready to go at your leisure.
Yeah, and always look for sales at stores. You know, Best Buy, Target, GameStop, Amazon. They always have stuff on sale. Maybe start with Skylanders. You can get them pretty cheap.
Or those poor Animal Crossing Amiibo, $4 each.
Even cheaper sometimes.
Great question.
Thank you. Come on up.
I have no knowledge of custom Amiibos, but I was wondering, do you guys come across any copyright cease and desist problems?
I have never heard of one from a custom artist, and I think Nintendo, at least with the Amiibo community, I think that they would be putting themselves in a pretty bad position if that was something that they would do. The artists that I know are die-hard Nintendo fans, and not just right now, I mean for their entire lives, and they invest so much time and energy into this, and the charity events alone that go into these figures. I can't imagine it would be something that we're going to see. Maybe at some point in the future it might come across, but for the time being, I've never seen one.
Yeah. TJ, did you have any?
You know, I don't really know exactly like it's a very hard area to police in that way, because you're purchasing a product and then you're reselling the product. So like if I bought an Amiibo and I wanted to sell that Amiibo to my friend, I could. If I wanted to sell, in fact, it's kind of like a less shady form of scalping. Because if somebody buys an $8 toy from the store and then peddles it for $50, they didn't do anything to it. What's the difference if I transformed it into a completely different figure? If it has that aftermarket value, then that's what it is. It's a toy that somebody already bought, and what you do with your own property is kind of your own business, right?
Also, I believe that a lot of these are one-of-a-kinds, and if they were being mass-produced with a line in a certain way and being sold regularly, I think that might be considered something more of a copyright problem. But usually when they're one-of-a-kind art pieces, I find that in any type of hobby, it's not as much of an issue with the bigger companies.
And you're not passing it off as an official Nintendo thing. I think that's where you would run into a legal issue.
If you want me to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so recently I needed 25 Pikachu, and I got so sick and tired of like trying to do it by bundle online by Best Buy, so they gave me an option to go ahead and call them, and in order to order 25 Pikachu, I had to talk to a guy, and he was just like, well, I have to make sure to do a background check on you first, and I guess they're assuming that I might have scalped them and then sold them as they were. But after a day, they contact me and they're just like, oh, so we did the background check and we noticed that you completely revamped them, so we're gonna approve you to have 25 Pikachu shipped to your house. And then they're just like, it's really cool what you do, and I was like, oh, thank you. But
Yeah, that's great.
That's perfect.
Know that, they know that if you're gonna scalp it, they won't approve it. But if you're purchasing it and you're revamping it completely, they're totally fine on that end, because yeah, I mean, it's custom made, you purchased it. It's as if, you know, your old stuff you're gonna sell on a garage sale, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing in a way, but.
It's exactly the same thing.
Sure.
All right, we
great.
have about 4 minutes left, so we're going to see how many we can get through here. Thank you.
Great
Come on
question.
up.
Thank you.
We can do this. We hear you.
We can, yeah, I think they.
I was wondering, I came a little bit late, so I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but I was wondering what sort of paint and clay you use.
I like to use Vallejo model color, but I also really like Citadel, which is the Warhammer paint. And for the clay, I use a 2-part epoxy called Milliput. I've also used Sculpey, but I find that for my purposes, Milliput is better. What modeling clay do you use, Ganda?
Use different types. So I heard that green stuff is really good. if you go to like a Magic store that sells board games or Warhammer figurines, they'll have everything that you need. So green stuff, I use Aves, which is a US-based retailer here, and they're really good. So Aves, I think they're out in Oklahoma. And then I also use Sculpey, but I use Sculpey in a way where I only use it for attachments, and then I apply Aves to make it stronger in that sense. So that's what I use.
Thank you. Come on up. All right, well, we're going to do the speed round here. So we got about 2 minutes.
In the same vein of paints, I was actually wondering if there's a level in which you don't bother. Like I tried looking at paints online, but I found it was mostly just a preference for a more, you mentioned you like acrylics, but is there like dollar store paint, is that too cheap or unusable?
You can definitely get acrylics for pretty cheap. Vallejo seems like it's not a very good value, but I spent like $2 on a bottle, and I've never needed to replace a bottle since the first custom I've done, because it goes really far. It goes a lot farther than you think it is. And I don't just buy indiscriminately. I pick the colors that I need. So I could probably I think I might have spent like $20 on paint total since I started. So you can get away with it for pretty inexpensively if you shop around.
Okay. Come on up.
Thank you.
I was wondering, what type of sealers do you recommend when you finish up painting?
The only one that I've used so far, because Vallejo is a model, or a miniature paint for like games that involve a lot of handling, it doesn't really require a sealer. It's designed so that you can handle it a lot, which is what Amiibo are for. Although, if you want to change the look of it, like to give it a glossier or a matte texture, I've been using Mod Podge lately. Which has like 15 different types, so you kind of have to experiment.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, last one.
This is really cool, and I've always wanted to do something like this, but I have no background as an artist. I've never done any kind of customs or anything like that. Is there any kind of like a book or like a starting point you would recommend for something
Yes.
completely coming in?
Go on YouTube as soon as you get home and check out this awesome show called Custom Conquest. There's 12 episodes out there, and if you can't pick up at least some of the basic skills to get yourself started, then I failed at life.
I'll definitely pick it up.
Wanting to do it is the best place to start, so honestly. You want to check in with GandaChris? Thank you for your question.
All right, GandaChris, real quick, do you want to show the progress you've made over the past hour? I know you're a little pixelated, and then we're going to have to let everybody go.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I didn't get as much as I wanted done, but if you guys are familiar with Roadhog, this is what I have so far. And yeah, I just got his belly done. So I'll do the tattoos and stuff later.
So we'll get some pictures up on Twitter if you guys want to get a better look of the progress that she made on this. And real quick, kind of our final plugs here. Honestly, you can find Miss GandaChris on Twitter at Miss GandaChris. You can find her on Instagram. If you're curious where to find us, we have a little channel called Amiibo News and NintendoWire.com. So if you're curious, that's where you can find us.
And you can all go to your personal social media sites and say with firsthand knowledge that Amiibo Jason really is cuter in person.
Thank you. Thank you. That's true. I appreciate it. Yeah, round of applause. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming out today. It's been fun talking about custom artwork. And again, thank you all for coming. I hope you had a great PAX.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.